President of the United States of America is an iconic symbol of freedom, liberty, and democracy around the world. The power to protect the President is the job of a specialized federal law enforcement agency under the jurisdiction of the Department of Homeland Security, commonly known as the Secret Service. However, this was not always the case. The immense responsibility of protecting the leader of the free world is a result of a turning point in history that changed not only the Secret Service itself, but also the accessibility of the President forever. The assassinations of President Abraham Lincoln in 1865 and President James Garfield in 1881 stunned the American people. But it wasn't until President William McKinley was assassinated in 1901 that large reforms began to take place in presidential protection. The attack and death of McKinley became a turning point that shaped the history of the Secret Service forever. Protecting the President, the turning point that shaped the history of the Secret Service, by Chase Serota.
The Secret Service was founded in 1865 to suppress counterfeit U.S. currency. The U.S. economy was awash with during the Civil War. So Abraham Lincoln decided we need help in stopping this because that counterfeit currency could be used to undermine the Union.
When the Secret Service was created, presidential protection was intermittent and spasmodic. The responsibility of protecting the President fell to soldiers from the War Department or the Washington Police. Often, the President was left completely unprotected. In fact, the debate between how to best protect the President while still keeping him accessible to the public was always an issue. This issue was even thought about during the construction of the White House itself. Washington designer Pierre L'Enfant envisioned the Executive Mansion to be a presidential palace, 5 times larger than the structure that was actually built. However, Democratic Republicans, led by future President Thomas Jefferson, opposed the plan. They called it royalism, too similar to a palace used by an English monarchy. The same principle applied to guarding the President. If there were too many guards, the public would not have enough access to their leader, which many Americans felt is an essential component in a democracy. This mentality would take the blood of 3 presidents before Congress finally decided to relent. For many decades, the President was often mixed in with the public. On the morning of July 2, 1881, President James Garfield strolled unguarded through a train station waiting room in Washington, D.C. Suddenly, mentally ill anarchist Charles J. Guiteau burst from the crowd and shot the President fatally in the back. People questioned the fact that Garfield was so easily approached. The New York Tribune reported that the President would become the slave of his office, the prisoner of forms and restrictions if security were to increase. Even though this assassination grasped the attention of the public, still no further action was taken. It wasn't until 10 years after the assassination of Garfield that the Secret Service began minimal, yet still informal protection, beginning with Grover Cleveland. In 1894, as part of their responsibilities to investigate fraud against the government, the Secret Service uncovered a plot to assassinate President Cleveland by anarchists. The agency was so concerned for the President's safety that they designated 2 men to protect Cleveland, therefore acting out of their jurisdiction. However, after being criticized by his political opponents for their protection, Cleveland told the agents that he did not want their help. His critics felt that his presidential security was too resemblant of a monarchy. But as the number of threatening letters addressed to the President increased, Mrs. Cleveland eventually persuaded the President to at least increase the number of policemen assigned to the White House. The Secret Service stepped in to supplement the White House police force, but still on an informal basis. The number of police slowly increased from 3 to 27 assigned to the White House, but there was still no protection for the President off White House grounds. The security in place was not enough to safeguard the next President, William McKinley. On a warm September day in 1901, the 25th President of the United States was attending a reception at the Temple of Music in Buffalo, New York. President McKinley greeted all of his admirers with a warm smile and a firm handshake. George Foster, one of the only 3 Secret Service agents present, noticed a man who had his right hand wrapped in a handkerchief. As McKinley made his way through this line of supporters, he too noticed the man's apparent disability, so he courteously reached to shake his left hand. Suddenly, Leon Czolgosz pushed his bandaged right hand directly into McKinley's chest. Witnesses report hearing 2 shots ring throughout the hall. Many looked on horrified with disbelief as the 25th president fell into the arms of his staff.
He staggered back, and his bodyguards leaped on Czolgosz and began pummeling him, and McKinley uttered words, "Be easy on him, boy."
The president was whisked away and immediately given medical attention, but tragically, 8 days later, he was dead. Officials determined the assassin was an anarchist, taking revenge on the president. At his execution, Czolgosz was recorded as saying, "I killed the president because he was an enemy of the good people, and I am not sorry for my crime." The American public felt differently. In his 1901 book, Marshall Everett wrote, "Never before was a death so causeless, a chief so beloved, so piteously laid low, and never was humanity startled from universal peace with a grief so sad." Others felt that important lessons must be learned from this crime. An Iowa newspaper published an article in which a friend of McKinley's wrote, "I warned him against this very thing, time and time again, and asked him, for the country's sake, if not for his own, to have a bodyguard when he went out. He refused. He laughed at me. He insisted that the American people were too intelligent and too loyal to their country to do any harm to their chief executive. He had supreme confidence in the people." After McKinley's death, the 3rd presidential assassination in just 36 years, Congress, as well as the public, finally began to acknowledge that the leader of the United States needed a more formal and substantial security network. A turning point had occurred. Around the world, other countries were coming to the same conclusions after dealing with similar problems. From 1894 to 1900, the President of France was murdered, as well as the Premier of Spain, the Empress of Austria, and the King of Italy. Solutions were being developed around the world. In America, many of these solutions involved the people losing accessibility to their leader. Congress as a whole continued to grope for a presidential protection mandate. 17 bills were proposed, with none becoming enacted. In the interim, the Secret Service began unofficially protecting the president, while an official legislative solution was being devised.
Well, a lot of it was political back then, as it is today. I mean, there was concerns in the Congress about what it would mean, and the process just took a lot longer.
Finally, in 1906, Congress ended their long journey to find the right presidential protection bill and passed the Civil Sundry Act that officially provided funds and mandated the president to be protected by the Secret Service.
People that passed the laws were reactive. Something bad happened, and then we put the fix in place. Now you have to think of the bad things that can happen and make sure you have the fixes in place and you don't allow them to happen.
Today, the Secret Service employs approximately 7,000 people, with a budget of $1.6 billion. Along with safeguarding the president, the Secret Service has expanded its duties of protection to include presidential spouses, families, and even presidential candidates. President Barack Obama is the most threatened president in history, reportedly receiving more than 30 death threats a day. The Secret Service also remains committed to their original purpose of investigating counterfeit currency. When Abraham Lincoln created the Secret Service in 1865, on the very day he was assassinated at Ford's Theater, he never envisioned that it would eventually become a world-renowned protective agency safeguarding his successors. Because of the McKinley assassination, the Secret Service protects our leaders, enabling them to
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
With the help of the Secret Service, our leaders are both secure and accessible to the public they serve.